if you don't figure out Amazon, then Amazon will figure you out. And so in many cases, we had people that were buying our product, listing our product. They were selling it, 100 times more than what you were selling it to them. And so we decided that we needed to take control of all of our listings at Amazon. As a business that's in an e-commerce marketplace, you have to deal with Amazon in some way. And you've got to understand it. And from our perspective, you have to control it to some degree. Now, at the same time, we'd be remiss if we didn't build the channel that or buy the channel ourselves. So we're not renting it from Amazon.
Hello, everyone. This is Daisy McCarty, fractional CMO here at the Marketing Blender. And today I have Ryan McConnell, president of Ventamatic, which manufactures the Max Air and Q-Fresh brands here in the Texas area. And today we're going to be talking about what it takes to grow as a U.S. brand in a world of global commerce. So welcome to the show, Ryan. Talk to me as president of Ventamatic. What does growth mean to you beyond just revenue?
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me on the podcast or the show here today. Growth beyond revenue basically means that you are bringing your organization up to a level that is really positioning yourself for the future and future growth. As a private company, I have the opportunity to not focus on profits this quarter and not necessarily place more emphasis on profitability today, more so than the long term. And so by building an overall company that's resilient beyond just looking at revenue growth, so long-term resiliency, I think one of the things that really weighs on me that as a leader, is that I am at the helm of a company that has been around for more than 75 years. So as the way I like to say it, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants that have built this company for multiple generations. And so it's really important for me that we focus on being a sustainable company. It's something that can truly provide jobs, provide products for people for decades, and not simply just looking for this year.
I think that's a really good point. With a business that's been around for over 75 years, you are playing a different game. And privately owned means you're not beholden to shareholders quarter after quarter. At the same time, the game is changing, and how you as an organization are playing that game is evolving as we're moving into definitely a more and more global world in terms of commerce. So as a manufacturer, talk to me about the metrics that really matter. What are the things that you're tracking beyond the obvious?
So obvious things are things like our manufacturing productivity on a day-to-day basis. That's kind of in manufacturing, that's kind of the inside baseball of what do you talk about, what do you work on, and things like that. But ultimately, we really approach things from kind of a customer satisfaction and on-time basis. In many cases, we're a seasonal manufacturing company or seasonal products company. So ventilation, not a lot of ventilation is sold at retail in the middle of December or January. So a lot of our calls, a lot of our demand comes, and a lot of our shipments come in April, May, and June. We have to think in terms of being flexible enough to expand our manufacturing capacity to meet our customers' demands during that time, but at the same time, not simply have big vacant warehouses or vacant production facilities come November, December. So
sure. And one of the things that I've noticed over the past year is living here in Texas. We all know that snow cone shops sell snow cones in the summer and firewood in the winter. And you've been making decisions around how to keep revenue higher even in the off season. Talk to me about your top 3 products for selling in the cooler weather.
I do think that people misunderstand ceiling fans and the true use of ceiling fans. I would say that the absolute best use of a ceiling fan is not necessarily for cooling. It's more for mixing air in a space. And I think a ceiling fan is much more efficient in bringing hot air off the ceiling and mixing it into your space efficiently. So in any given, if you have a house that's in an envelope essentially, and you have especially modern homes that have like multi-stories and great rooms and things like that, when that heat pumps into your great room, It's simply that heat is going to rise and it's going to stay on the ceiling. So just as if you go into your attic in the summertime and that attic is super hot, sometimes you can get up in the higher parts of your ceiling in the wintertime and you could find it 20 degrees hotter in the wintertime. And that's inefficient use of your HVAC. And so I really do feel like ceiling fans are very misunderstood in terms of their overall use in the marketplace.
That's true. I think a lot of people do hear fan and they think cool me off.
Mm-hmm.
They don't think about that interplay between a traditional HVAC system and the other pieces of the ventilation system, which include mechanical movement of the air with the ceiling fans. Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit about, over the last 75 years, Ventamatic has been a B2B company for the majority of that time. Mm-hmm. And there's been a move into more direct-to-consumer selling in more recent years. Talk to me about when e-commerce stopped being a side channel and became a key focus of the business.
So roughly 15 years ago, Ventamatic, prior to that point, it was if you want to buy from us, you better buy in truckloads or pallet loads. And obviously that doesn't necessarily work in e-commerce on a direct consumer basis. It really started off with partners like HomeDepot.com to really open our eyes up to the way Home Depot was looking at things. Is our e-commerce store is going to be our largest store. So people used to fight to get in shelf space in some of their biggest stores in the United States in terms of sellers and things like that. Well, your e-commerce store became the largest store, and that really changed our attitude about we're only going to sell to you in the truckload or in the pallet load side. And so we actually had to retool our business to where we were manufacturing, and we're actually, instead of putting it in a retail box, we're putting it in just a craft box or just a brown box. Because one of the things that they found is that a craft box was like 10 times less likely to be stolen off of somebody's porch than something in a retail box. But I would say that some of our partners, our retail partners, really brought us into the e-commerce world, but then we really expanded from there. One of the great stories that we like to tell is the old way that we used to ship out replacement products. And that was, people would call in and they would say, my motor has gone out. And we would say, okay, what's your model? And then we'd get all that information. We'd say, okay, send a check to this address. And once the check clears, then we'll go ahead and we're going to ship that to you. Well, we took a process that took upwards of, in some cases, 2.5 to 3 weeks at best. And we brought, just simple e-commerce of, instead of sending a check, you're going to put your credit card in and we'll charge that and we'll ship you immediately. And we obviously saw a big growth in our overall, not just our products, parts and replacement and things like that, but I'm sure we're servicing other people's parts and replacement as well through that system.
So talk to me about the Amazon versus Shopify decisions, because you've got the option to rent the channel, rent your customers basically, that Amazon owns, or you've got the option to build out your own e-commerce. And you've had a lot of experience with both at this point.
Right.
So you've been able to really nail down what is it costing you to work through Amazon, and how difficult is it to grow private channels. So talk to me about the, first of all, biggest misconception people have about selling on Amazon. Do a little myth busting first, and then let's talk about Amazon versus Shopify.
Yeah, I think the first thing that a lot of people have a misconception about Amazon is that Amazon buys everything from you and then takes it into a warehouse and resells it. There are two very distinct categories within Amazon, which is the Amazon FBA, the fulfilled by Amazon, and then the vendor fulfilled side of Amazon. And that's where, in many cases, to introduce something to Amazon, you've got to make a new listing, and then you're fulfilling that directly out of your warehouse. At no point does Amazon buy something from you unless they have actually sold something before. And that was a big, when I was explaining that to people, this is probably a decade ago, that was really the lightning bolt moment for a lot of people, is they said, well, I thought they bought everything. Well, no, they don't. And in those cases, those marketplaces that we're selling through, the renting, those do actually have some pretty considerable costs. So Amazon in our product category takes 15% of the total sale, even though they don't actually physically take possession of the product nor buy it before they've sold it. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, no risk, all upside.
It's a great business model if you can get it. Yeah. So there are some people that immediately when they saw that, they said, well, 15%, that's ridiculous. We shouldn't sell through Amazon. Well, our belief is if you don't figure out Amazon, then Amazon will figure you out. And so in many cases, we had people that were buying our product, listing our product. In some strange cases, they're selling it for less than you're selling it to them. I have no idea how that's sustainable over time. In some cases, they were selling it, 100 times more than what you were selling it to them. And so we decided that we needed to take control of all of our listings at Amazon because, again, if you don't figure out Amazon will figure you out. As a business that's in an e-commerce marketplace, you have to deal with Amazon in some way. And you've got to understand it. And from our perspective, you have to control it to some degree. Now, at the same time, we'd be remiss if we didn't build the channel that or buy the channel ourselves. So we're not renting it from Amazon. And we do that through Shopify. And so our Shopify site is something that it runs, we don't say we only sell direct consumer through this model or through this mode through Shopify or through Amazon. It's something that we have a blended strategy of the two. There are some things that do great on our Shopify channel that do terribly on Amazon, and vice versa, truly. So
I think it's kind of the same idea that people often have when they're like, oh, we can reach so many more people through social media, and they neglect email. I see this a lot with B2B. It's like, no, you own your email list that you've cultivated. Those are people who trust you. They're going to buy from you more than anybody who just saw a random thing on social. So I think it's smart to have, not putting your head in the sand to try to ignore Amazon because they're definitely not going away.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, not neglecting building your own channel, even though that does mean, hey, there are costs that go into building the site, that go into maintaining the site. A lot of it goes into advertising, and that's where profits can be eroded as well if you're not getting a good return on your ad spend. But I think that blended approach definitely makes sense. So when you're deciding what lives on Amazon versus what lives on Shopify, any high level factors for that might be helpful for other people without giving your competitors your secret?
Big advantage. I'd say the actual physical size of things. Our sweet spot with Amazon sometimes is smaller things that can actually go in their FBA warehouses. I think it's no secret that if you're in a Fulfilled by Amazon warehouse, you can get Prime because, Prime is all about delivering within a very short period of time. When you're doing vendor fulfilled Prime, it's a little bit more difficult to do that. So the size of it to be able to go into a Fulfilled by Amazon warehouse, I think is pretty important. And they don't take everything. There are certain things, even our smaller stuff is known as like triple oversized to an Amazon warehouse. In general, smaller things go better through the Amazon channel.
Speaking of the shipping and delivery side of it, how is freight and LTL, how are all of those logistics aspects changing some of your decisions around growth?
With where we're sitting today in early March of 2026, there's a possibility of transportation prices really going up, and consumers have grown to expect free shipping across the board. As we entered into the Amazon marketplace and our own Shopify marketplaces, we made the decision to go with free shipping. So the price that you see is the price that you pay, right? Freight is rolled into that. Based on freight prices going up, that you might see a decoupling. I've heard a rumor of people decoupling where they'll show the product price and then they're going to show the delivery price after that as well. And so the logistics side, cost is such a huge driver to that, right? We've chosen to fulfill mostly out of our own warehouse here in North Texas. Texas happens to be a great place to be a distributor we can cover most of the country, whether it's a FedEx ground or a UPS ground in about 2 days. LTL about the same. But I would say that is one of the more challenging parts to our business is how to price things correctly based on freight changes nowadays, as well as, quite frankly, there's a lot of LTL businesses, a lot of LTL freight businesses that have gone out of business in the past 5 years. Some notable ones that used to be our lowest cost providers are not there anymore. And so It's ever evolving, put it that way.
And that's definitely not going to change. I think that price volatility in freight, customers, to your point, they're used to at least concealed pricing for freight.
All right.
But it definitely makes it harder to compete on the Amazon front. So besides shifting traffic from Amazon to the Maxair Shopify store, what are some of the other ways that you protect margins from Amazon erosion?
Continually innovate. And so the way I describe it is the longer you stay on one type of style or one model and it doesn't really change at all. Our Asian competitors are fantastic at just getting behind us, copying the same thing and then offering it for 25% less. So innovation is one of the key things for margin protection. And if we are not upgrading, updating, even just color changes on occasion, we can find ourselves to the victim of market erosion, where someone else is coming in and selling the same thing, virtually the same thing that we're selling at a lower price.
And as a marketer, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that one of the other things you can do to protect your profit margin is make sure you're building a strong brands that people know, like, and trust and will buy, even if they cost more than the competition, are the most successful organizations. So talk to me about competing. You've mentioned overseas competitors a couple of times, but being, an American-based brand, an American manufacturing facility right here in Texas, talk to me about competing in the global economy.
In terms of a global marketplace, what's important from our perspective is that we also participate in the global marketplace, meaning that we constantly source new components from overseas and try to find the best cost and quality from there. But ultimately, we do rely on both our engineering and our manufacturing processes in North America in order to be competitive within our marketplace, although utilizing the same global components that give our competitors advantages.
So just like with Amazon, you've got and Shopify, you've got that hybrid model.
Right.
Let's look at the realities of our marketplace. What does it take to remain competitive? Talk to me a little bit about how you remain cost competitive in a global market, and then just supply chain control.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are some occasions that when we look at products, we simply cannot compete with an Asian competitor on certain product categories. And so, for instance, we typically do larger industrial size ventilation, and that has its own barriers to entry to Asian competitors because large industrial ventilation takes up a lot of space in containers, as opposed to smaller, like consumer style ventilation, like little hand fans and things like that, where you can fit 10,000 in a container. There are some products that we make that you can only fit 20 of them in a container. There are some cases that we don't simply want to play in price. We want to make sure that we're playing based on our brand and our brand values, right? I'd like to point out we do put a premium on quality. We do actually put a premium on performance as well. So you could call that, that is part of quality. But there are many instances where our Asian competitors, for lack of a better term, absolutely lie about their overall performance of their product. So we bring it into our lab. They make some outlandish claim that this tiny little fan does 15,000 CFM. We bring it in our lab. It only does 500 CFM. But they use these really strange metrics, and they try to justify what they're saying, because really there should be truth in advertising, right? You should be able to back up those claims. I think the FCC tells us that, right? That is one thing that we also, you don't like to sound like the nerdy guy in the corner and go, well, actually, this is how you do the math equation. But we try to stand on 75 years of manufacturing a product and delivering quality. There are many fans out there in the marketplace. I've seen our product in places for over 20, 25 years, and it's still going it's still operating the same, like it did on the same day that it was bought. Yeah.
And to the point about doing the nerdy thing, just like there are people who love, the how it's made style videos, head-to-head comparison videos.
All right.
The Maxair YouTube channel has one called Mythbusters, and it's head-to-head comparisons of the Maxair American-made brand versus name your competitor. And it's fascinating. And that's the kind of thing that people actually, they like to see, and they believe it.
Yeah.
Do you believe that there is a strong segment in the United States that likes to to buy American made? Like, is that really still a thing? Is it a marketing slogan, or is it like there is still a core that's like, I want to buy stuff that was made here in North America because there's just something I trust about it?
And I would like to think that there is that portion of the population. And I know, and I've met people that come up to us and say, I am so proud that I'm buying a product that's made in the USA. And so, yes, I do believe it's there. I'm a little agnostic when it comes to the old 100% made in the USA, because I do think if you saw what the sticker price is on something that truly is 100% made in the United States, I think people would be absolutely shocked.
Right.
Absolutely shocked.
Well, we don't have the infrastructure to even obtain some of the materials
Absolutely
that were used in.
Absolutely. And if you do, then oftentimes, if you can build it in the U.S., sometimes there's a giant premium on it. So I would like to think that yes, people on our USA made products, that they would put a premium on it and they would say, yes, I'm buying this from you because of that. I think generationally, less and less people are looking. I mean, I hardly ever find people that are pulling a product off the shelf and scouring the product to see the made in the USA on it. But it's our job to try to be the optimists in that, and because we do have a lot of USA based manufacturing, and we're the guys that want to beat the drum that there is a difference between a USA based manufacturer with support in engineering as well than an overseas brand.
For sure. And I think that's the piece of it, that we're still living in a world where word of mouth matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of story that people actually tell is, oh, there was something I had a question about and I called in a human being pick up the phone.
Right.
And we spoke the same language and I was able to get the help that I needed. So I think it's some of the intangibles around that as long as it's not just a sticker that you put on stuff, where there's like, we're an accountable company, we're reachable. There are things around that. If you're living up to the promise of what people expect from that label, then there's still an advantage to that.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about scaling a legacy American brand in a digital world. So how do you stay true to the roots of Ventamatic, over 75 years in business, generation after generation? And then how do you continue to evolve and expand that and manage how customers perceive your brand as it changes? Yeah,
I like to think in terms of, we have legacy product lines and legacy products that we still make. We make what is called in the marketplace, a whole house fan. People know them as attic fans. That is a product that will draw air up from your living space. You open up the windows and then it expels the hot air into your attic. We still make that product. There are, although traditional HVAC and refrigerant HVAC probably does a better job, there's still people that's the sound of summer to them, especially in more northern climates. They open up those windows in the summertime and then they let that whole house fan run. I will never get rid of that product. I will never advocate to get rid of that product. As a matter of fact, I'd love to see us do more of that. Maintaining that legacy and that legacy product lines, but always casting an eye to the future. So I do picture Ventamatic is we continue to make the legacy products, but we improve upon them and then we move into new product categories as well. So that to me, when we talk about the evolution of the company and the continued evolution of the company, it is keep those things that have built you and have made you great, and then add to that. Never put something in the garbage can that still has great value to you.
For sure. Mm. And speaking of making decisions, what's one of the hardest decisions you've had to make as a leader in the last 3 years?
I'll go back a little bit further than 3, and this was COVID. At the start of COVID, we had approximately 4 manufacturing locations here in North Texas, and I think our head count at the time was roughly 100 people, right as COVID hit. And I would say my hardest decision as a leader was trying to understand how to keep our operations running safely, because at the time we were learning a lot about COVID and what it was and what it wasn't and things like that. And then also balancing how to keep that company going, because at the time, at the very beginning of COVID, we didn't know if we'd be able to, if people would continue to buy our products. We didn't know if we could actually if we could legally continue to manufacture and bring people together underneath the roof. So it was navigating that on a day-to-day basis. I would say that was one of the most influential experiences on my leadership career. I had some great management team members within our company that we communicated every single day. I mean, we were on the phone constantly trying to work through new regulations and things like that. And ultimately, I feel like we made our way through the kind of panicked part of the of the initial days of COVID. Frankly, made it through very successfully without any major hiccups or safety issues. I'll put it that way.
Well, it was certainly a time that there were a lot of new risks coming into the market that nobody could predict or expect. Mm-hmm. But now that things are a little more calm, what are some of the risks that you look at today when it comes to competing in the global marketplace?
We have a lot of variability in our overall costs that's related to tariffs. And so a lot of our competitors are overseas based, and whether that is in China or in Vietnam or Thailand or other locations, those tariffs are ever changing on a daily, monthly basis. And so we don't exactly know where our competitors are coming in terms of their cost. We can't look out 6 months and so say, this is definitely where we think their costs are. Now, we are also in a global environment as well, meaning that the metals markets and things like that, even the USA-based metals, they will be affected by tariffs because if there's no overseas competition based on really high tariffs, they're going to raise their prices. And so we have lots of cost variability. And I would say cost variability is one of our biggest risks as a company today, as a USA manufacturer. I get the tariff strategy. I understand it. I don't necessarily have to like it, right? I don't have to like it for my own business. I get it. And it's something that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I really do think that's one of the bigger challenges that we face as a company here in competing globally.
It's interesting. Most of the manufacturers I talk to, it's very similar. It's like things are changing, even if like there's a temporary advantage, then it becomes a disadvantage. And just that ability to remain resilient in the face of constant change, which feels a lot like chaos,
right,
is challenging. So speaking of resilience, how do you make decisions to balance short-term gains versus long-term outcomes?
Well, we obviously always have to balance profitability, right? There are times, every decision has to be based on the ability to turn a profit long term and in the short term as well. I'd say that we're a little bit more focused on the long-term profitability side at Ventamatic. We like to get into product lines that we feel are, we can sustain a long-term profit. And that really guides a lot of our decision-making in the overall process. But it certainly does, on a day-to-day basis. There may be occasions that we can utilize our balance sheet in order to buy more raw materials at a more favorable price today, and need to go ahead and take advantage of that.
So looking forward, in terms of balancing direct consumer with traditional distribution, where are you guys right now, just in really general terms? Do you see one outpacing the other at some point in the future? So
going back to the evolution, and tradition of not getting rid of some line of business in order to go chase the new shiny line of business, that is something that we're also, I think, as a management team, we're really strong about, is making sure that we're balancing the two. I remember early on in the e-commerce days, somebody stood up in a meeting and said, well, all you want to do is just sell direct to the consumer. I said, that is by no means what I want to do. I am not advocating. They haven't managed an Amazon storefront if they think right. I am not advocating that we only sell directly to the consumer, but it is a part of the market that you do have to take advantage of where you can. If there are some products that just don't go well through a traditional brick and mortar retail store, and you have an advantage selling online directly to a consumer, I think you should do that. So it's a case by case basis. Unfortunately, I'd love to be able to throw a wide net over something. Say we're going 100% direct to consumer, and on this line of products. But in reality, it doesn't work that way. So I do believe it is a balance. We will find advantages in many cases continuing to go through brick and mortar, and then in some cases going through direct to consumer.
Once again, it's the hybrid model.
It is.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So what does an American manufacturing company need to look like in 2030 to win? And this is bring out your crystal ball, because we've just described an incredibly chaotic, difficult to predict landscape. Right. I'm just going to put you on the spot.
Right. I think, unfortunately, I don't think that being a manufacturing worker has the same, or working in a manufacturing environment has the same cachet that it once did. And I do think that's a bit of our problem in USA manufacturing today, is that for the equivalent wage, would you like to be on a production line, or would you like to be driving an Amazon delivery truck? Right. I think a lot of the younger generation might go more towards the Amazon delivery truck. And so I think from our perspective, being able to, and by no means do I sit here and say that I am the king of automation, that our processes are as automated as they possibly could be. We have some very, very old school ways of manufacturing within our organization, but we also have some pretty modern ways as well. I do think that modernization and automation is going to play a huge role in manufacturing in the future, because there are fewer and fewer people that want to go into our industry. Now, I'll say the ones that do want to go into manufacturing, and the people that have a passion for it, and whether it's on the engineering side, it could even be on in many cases we use stamping type dies that are very old school stamping equipment. But there's an absolute art to designing the tooling that goes inside of that. The people that do want to go into that are going to have great job security in the future. But I do think that many of the manual processes that we have today as a manufacturer need to go more towards automation. And I think that will be one of the keys to surviving and continuing to thrive as a USA manufacturer if I were to put myself in the year 2030. Right.
Excellent. I've worked with a lot of B2B manufacturers over the last 10 years, and I hear very similar things in terms of young people are just not coming into manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And I'm baffled as to why. My very first job, full-time job, was in production, and I would 100% rather do that than be behind a wheel. Mm-hmm. So it's steady work. It's stable. People I know who go into it, they stay for 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, it's long-term, and it's one of the only types of industries where that type of career longevity is still even a possibility. So I'm hoping we see youngsters getting excited about manufacturing again, because I think it's a great career.
I think it could be great for people that do like it. One of the most satisfying things I can tell you. So I started off in a career in finance, and I remember this is in Fort Worth, and I was going down the elevators, and it was late one evening, and I said to myself, this is one of the most unsatisfying things I could be doing with my time, is I could not put my hands on what I was doing every day. It was important, and by golly, we absolutely need finance professionals. I'm not belittling that career at all. But for me, it was important for me to, I love to see my product rolling off the end of the line. I love to see it loaded in trucks, and I absolutely love to see it in use in the marketplace. And I say marketplace, consumers using it. And one of the great things that you'll find in manufacturing companies is everybody. And so, for instance, with our products, we make a lot of different fans. They're pretty easy to recognize based on their color and things like that. And I guarantee everybody that's in our process, when they see that with their family, they say, look, that's my fan. Yes. That's my fan. And that's really gratifying, extremely gratifying. And everybody in the supply chain, whether it's the person that's doing the, receiving a raw material, or the person that actually is putting, turning the screws on the product, to the person that's shipping that, everybody has the right to say, that's my fan, right? And I think that's one of the very cool things about manufacturing, is the ability to look at something produced at the end of the day and say, I was a part of that, and that's mine.
That's one of the reasons I'm really excited about this coming year, getting more and more video content that's telling the story of how it's made and the people that make it. Because I think being able to capture that pride in, hey, we made this. Right. And we made this, right here in Texas. I think that's a fantastic story, and one that deserves to be told. Okay, rapid fire, final questions. In a fantasy world where you were competing solely on value and not on price, what would you focus on?
I would focus on really big fans, on like really big portable fans that that could take the place. I really am personally passionate about how do we reduce our overall energy consumption by the use of HVAC and refrigerant HVAC. In these times of year, whether it's the shoulder season of fall and spring, how can we reduce the amount of energy that we're using to cool our homes, right? So the old-fashioned way was, you turn off the AC and you open the windows. Well, there's other ways to do that, and there's a lot of people that they physically can't do that because of their allergies or safety or a variety of different things. But I really do feel like I'm pretty passionate about how can we reduce overall energy consumption through the use of HVAC, of ventilation instead of refrigerant HVAC. So,
What are global competitors doing better than U.S. manufacturers?
Well, I tell you one thing they're doing better is they get more government assistance. And by that, I mean specifically the Chinese. They get advantages through financing. They get advantages in raw materials. They get all kinds of different advantages from their actual governments to produce and export products that we don't get. So that is something we constantly feel like we're fighting overseas competitors based on the advantages that they get really from their governments in many cases. So they do get advantages from their governments, number one. And two, I do think that there are many of our competitors overseas that I really take my hat off. As frustrating as it is, I absolutely take my hat off to them how fast they can copy and develop something that we've done that has taken us 2 to 3 years, right? And so oftentimes I really do admire how fast they move and how fast they can move in the marketplace. And they perhaps do it a little bit better than us because we're a bit cautious, right? We've got a brand name to protect. We have a dedication to safety that that sometimes slows us down, where we ask those questions about, is this product truly safe for the end user? That oftentimes the overseas person who's doing something, who's just copying what we do, they don't necessarily have to think about that. They're just looking at what Ventamatic does and then they copies that.
So just random question then. If you could talk into the camera and tell the U.S. government one thing that they could do for U.S. manufacturers that would make your life easier, make your impassioned plea now.
Yeah. What I'd love to see is a unified manufacturing policy, essentially, that we look at certain industries that are important and we give them advantages. We give them long-term goals about what we need these industries to do, and we give them a roadmap basically for how to get there. And so if it's perhaps assistance that we could get with automation, I would love to see the government provide some sort of assistance and low-cost loans. And I know that they're out there. They're not exactly easy to find for every industry, but something that would be a broader program to incentivize our companies, besides just tax policy, to invest in long-term automation that then makes us competitive against people that are simply low-wage providers overseas.
All right. Final thoughts on how other manufacturers might make decisions. What are the criteria that you would recommend for them as they're facing such an interesting time?
One of the most important things that I think that we can do as U.S.-based manufacturers is to talk with one another. It's so incredibly important. Oftentimes we get in these little silos where we believe, well, if I talk to my competitor, then he's going to find out some advantage about me. And obviously you have to watch out on, pricing. You can't talk about pricing issues and things like that because that could be seen as price fixing. But certainly in between different industries, I think it's really important to talk about what's working and not working. And so I love our local network of manufacturers and businesses in North Texas that I feel like we do have a good forum for in some different places for exchanging ideas. One very big thing I think that collectively can do is, you just asked me the question about about what the government could do for us is having a voice as an industry, and making sure that we are making our voices heard. We're told that we're really important, right? We're told that USA manufacturing is really important, but oftentimes people don't necessarily ask us our opinions on things. So let's, as USA manufacturers, let your opinion be heard on what can help you. Not necessarily get some sort of advantage through a tariff on your competitor from overseas or something like that. Oftentimes that only breeds a lack of innovation and things like that. But do, collectively let your voice known about what could help. Whether that is low cost training from a university system that could provide you some temporary engineering or something like that. Letting your voice heard to ask for those things and see what the government can provide us and other resources locally can provide us.
I like it. And I completely agree with you. Manufacturers need to be talking to each other. That's one of the reasons we have guests like Ryan McConnell from Ventamatic here on the show. If you're struggling with how to grow in the current climate, if you're looking at, I'm a B2B company, but I need to add a direct-to-consumer channel. If you're looking at how do I use my brand to increase my profitability, please continue watching here at The Marketing Blender and give us a call if you need help. Thank you, and onward and upward.